Welcome, everybody. It's time once again to grab your board, catch a wave, and pick up that big pipeline, the sales pipeline with Matt Hines of Hines Marketing. Hey, Matt, how are you?
Good, Paul. How are you?
I'm doing good today. It stopped raining. You know, when it rains for a day in Southern California, it's like a disaster. So it rained yesterday, and everybody's all upset. But today the sun's out.
What do you mean a disaster? I thought you guys were in some kind of dramatic drought down there.
We are. We just want it to rain at night, though. You know, when it rains in California, people literally stay home and say, "Oh, forget it. I won't even bother to go out today."
Just if you would mind raining like nights and weekends,
yes.
We're not driving to work. That'd be great. It reminds me, up here in Seattle. When it reaches 90 degrees, of course, the entire West Coast, there's no humidity. And it's generally, it's very temperate, right?
Right.
So when it gets to be 90 degrees with no humidity in Seattle, it's front page news. Like, you will have the newscasters, it's the first story, and they'll have someone outside under an umbrella because you can't get direct sun, right? And saying, okay, carry water with you, stay hydrated.
Yes, right.
You've got 2 weeks of food just in case you get stuck, on the sidewalk. I mean, it's really...
We take our weather serious on the West Coast here.
Yeah, and I'm guessing that Joe Chernov, who lives in Boston, is just laughing at us.
He doesn't understand any of this. Right.
No, he's like, what is wrong with you people? I mean, I think most of my extended family is in Illinois and Iowa, and they're the same way, where they're like, you get stuck in the snow. It's the deal. In the summer, you bake until you just are perspiring because it's 1,000 degrees humidity. Like, what's wrong?
Exactly.
With you soft people out on the West Coast.
We're not used to weather changes.
No, we're not. But I'll tell you what, I'll take it. I'll take what we got. It's pretty nice living up here in Seattle, and it's been nice. This is the second consecutive week I've been able to do the show from the world headquarters here in Redmond, Washington. Wow, that streak will end after today, unfortunately. But hey, thanks very much, everyone, for joining us here at Sales Pipeline Radio. Always a pleasure to have you. We are live every week at 2:30 Eastern, 11:30 Pacific. You can always catch every episode as well through the podcast at Google Play or the iTunes Store, and every one of our past episodes and all of our past speakers and guests of the show are on salespipelineradio.com. We are hitting the end of September. I think today is the very first day of fall. I'm starting to feel the weather outside. Our office here is excited. Someone brought in a whole bunch of pumpkin spice stuff, which... I'm not sure how much pumpkin or spice is in any of those, actually. Probably just the flavors that we get from chemical factories out in New Jersey. But excited to have fall here. And then next week we will be doing the show live from Dreamforce, the Salesforce annual conference that I think they're up to about 800,000 people that descend. I'm kidding. It's a lot of people, but descend in San Francisco for 3 or 4 days. And I have a feeling that actually, I don't know. It'll be interesting to find out if our guest today is going to be there. But excited. This is our second attempt to get Joe Chernov on the show. The last time we did this, we had some super fun technical difficulties. He was super cool about not having to make that, and he was able to make it here today. So, Joe, I believe we called you the Godfather of B2B content marketing in the promotional materials. I don't know if that makes you feel old, if it's related to the recently departed beard. I don't know what it is, but Joe, welcome to the show. And how do you feel about being called a Godfather?
Look, as long as I'm not the Fredo of content marketing, I'll take it. But I think that honor goes to Joe Polizzi. I'd hand it to him.
There are a handful of people in and around the industry that I think when people think about content marketing, they're the people you think about. Joe Polizzi is definitely one. I think Ann Hanley's another. But don't sell yourself short. I mean, I think the work that you've done throughout your career to really advance not just what's done in content marketing, but the impact and strategic role of content marketing in B2B has been significant. So, talk a little bit about where that got started for you. I mean, you were at HubSpot, you spent time at Eloqua, you really built out an extremely robust content marketing effort at Eloqua that it clearly became the model for a lot of companies, including HubSpot, including Marketo, including many in the MarTech space. Talk about how that began for you. Why did that become a focus for you, for Eloqua, and how did that begin to mature over there?
Sure. It's unbelievable what you can get done if you don't care if you get fired. And I joined Eloqua in a PR and social media role. And it was clear very early on that generating press was going to be a tough nut to crack. It was sort of the beginning of bloggers sort of ousting traditional media. and there was a decay in the number of kind of quote-unquote credentialed journalists out there. And those that were out there were covering, Apple, Google. This is pre-Uber, but there was a handful of companies that they would cover, and everybody else had to fight for the scraps. And I was getting frustrated fighting for the scraps. And one day, Brian Cardin and I were talking. Brian Cardin was my boss. He was the CMO, and it occurred to us that what journalists would write about wasn't necessarily your new product or our new product or a new service or a new certification we received, but if we were to publish something that was genuinely valuable, inherently valuable, they would write about that, and we could kind of elbow our way into paragraph number 2, right? Because the reporter would have to say who published this thing. And so the key being publish a good thing and then get the company's positioning in paragraph 2. And I'm going to fast forward a couple of years. A couple of years in, we finally released a product called Eloqua 10, which was years in the works. And we hired 2 PR firms, one domestically, one internationally, to help generate awareness for it. And I think we got like 16 articles on the announcement. And along the way, I had published an infographic called the Content Grid, and there were 800 articles on the Content Grid. Now, we don't measure press by pound, and there's certainly varying degrees of importance to each story. But just to give you a sense of the magnitude difference between the two, the entire company spent 2 years on one product, and it got 16 articles, and an infographic got 800.
So help define for me what is content marketing. I think everyone's got a different definition. I tend to like the overarching definition from Annie Hanley that everything the light touches is content. It's broad, and I think there's a purpose behind it. But when you think about developing a content marketing program in a company, what does that mean? What does that encompass?
I think content marketing is what happens when a marketing department shifts its thinking from knowing that the company signs their paychecks to imagining the customer signs their paychecks. Right? If your customer signed your check, what would you produce? You'd produce something that was valuable for the customer. And I think that very subtly, that's the distinction between, I think it's that shift in mindset that turned, collateral into an ebook, turned, a self-serving white paper into, a piece of a longer form piece of content that teaches somebody how to do something. I think it's that slight pivot in thinking about who you serve. And if you shift from serving the executive to serving the buyer, good things happen.
I love that shift and thinking about who your actual audience is. Talking to Joe Chernov today on Sales Pipeline Radio. Joe is the head of marketing at Insight Squared. If you are trying to improve the reporting and improve the visibility into what's working in marketing, if you're a B2B company, you definitely need to check out Insight Squared. But Joe has been around the block on the content marketing front for a very long time. And you mentioned Joe Polizzi. Joe, I know you were out at Content Marketing World a couple weeks ago, and the number of people that are at that conference has exploded, and I think it's very much in parallel with just the number of companies that are doing content marketing now. Is there a concern that we are flooding the world with content, that there are so many people doing content marketing now that it's no longer going to work, and or are there certain tenets that you recommend that can help people continue to drive real value and results out of their content efforts?
Well, it's a mouthful. I remember reading an essay about 15 years ago, written by the filmmaker Robert Altman. And he was telling a story about how he was with a friend, and they were on a boat. It was late at night, and the moon was shining on the ocean, and he looks, and just as far as he can see, there's water. And he said, "Look at all that water," to his friend, and his friend said to him, "And that's only the surface." I think that there is more and more content marketing happening, yes, and that makes it more and more difficult for signal to be heard, and that's only the surface. If you read some of the reports out there, more than 50% of companies' content goes unused. And there are companies that exist to unlock that untapped 50%. And that's what's below the surface. Overnight, we could have a dramatic surge in the amount of content that's out there if some of these companies are successful. I wish them well, but there are repercussions for everyone because it's just going to get even more difficult to have your signal heard. And so I think it puts more pressure on originality. It makes me a little crazy that I see companies publishing a definitive guide ebook when I know that, John Miller and Maria Pergolino were doing those in 2009. I think that we've rested on our laurels a little bit. So I think that originality coupled with really smart distribution and kind of data-backed decisions, that's going to be the only way to break through.
I'd agree with you on that. I think definitive guides, white papers, webinars, we tend to lean back in some of the same formats. I think a lot of people, when they think about content, they think about the written word. Talk about some of the ways that people do differentiate around that. I mean, is it related to the approach they take with the content? Heinz Marketing, we've always been very written word based over the last 8 months or so. We've been doing this radio show and podcast. So, what are the ways you're seeing good companies, including if you're willing to share some of the stuff you might be doing in Insight Squared, to differentiate and diversify what you're doing so that it does stand out as something unique?
So I'll talk a little bit about what we're doing. What we're trying to do is apply some of the ethos that makes for good content marketing, and that is largely kind of shifting your thinking from serving your organization to serving your buyer. And we're trying to apply that to direct mail, for example. So rather than send a coffee mug with a logo on it or a T-shirt with a logo on it, we're trying to do things that are a little bit more original. Like my sense is you send a T-shirt with a logo on it, and the deal is square, right? Like the person gets a T-shirt in exchange for wearing your logo. There's nothing left to do there. What we're trying to do is we have a campaign that if we lose you, that is, if you went through a demo, you went through a sales process, but for whatever reason you didn't buy the product, we know that the next time you come back into our funnel, you're twice as likely to buy versus the first time you were through. So what we try to do is accelerate them coming back. One campaign we're running is if you're closed lost and we can start to re-engage you, we include you in a campaign where we send you a postcard that reads, "Come running back." And on the back of the postcard, there's a link to a landing page where you enter your shoe size. And we send you a pair of Nike ID sneakers in Insight Squared's color scheme. There's no Insight Squared logo on them. The deal is not square, right? Like, if we made them wear sneakers with our logo, we can't sort of guilt them into the follow-up sales call. But if they get them without the logo, I've joked that it's sort of like Jewish mother marketing. There's this kind of guilt expectation that they've got to take the call from them, and it works really, really well.
Well, and like we were saying before, everything the light touches is marketing, and I love the way that you're integrating in content into other campaigns. I mean, there's no reason that content marketing needs to be its own separate division, and you've got direct mail, and you've got sales, and you've got other people doing stuff elsewhere. I want to talk a lot more. We got a lot more with Joe Chernov, who is the head of marketing at Insight Squared, and is Godfather, definitely one of the pioneers in B2B content marketing. We'll talk more about what's happening in content today, how that's integrating across other channels, including the sales organization, and then what it's going to mean moving forward. Thanks very much for joining us. We'll be right back. Sales Pipeline.
In a world where the speed of innovation and change in B2B marketing has never been greater, the only thing bigger is the need for clarity, for a blueprint, for a guide to what's really working. And how about a way to apply it specifically today to increase sales pipeline growth, velocity, and most of all, conversion? That's what you'll find in the Modern Marketer's Field Guide. And amazingly, you can download it for free. HeinzMarketing.com, just like it sounds, HeinzMarketing. It encompasses the entire sales and marketing cycle, but in quick bursts with lots of specific, actionable ideas, strategies, tactics you can put to work right away like today. The loaded table of contents helps you narrow in and tackle a problem. And it's something you can come back to over and over again as a reference guide. Why not download your free copy of the Modern Marketer's Field Guide? It's free. HeinzMarketing.com, just like it sounds. HEINZ, marketing.com.
Whether you're producing a seminar series, users conference, lunch and learn, or exhibiting at a trade show, Validar has a solution. From capturing leads at trade shows to managing on-site registration, tracking session attendance, gathering information, and providing sponsors lead retrieval, we have a full suite of solutions for you. Since 2005, Validar has been turning corporate events and trade shows into better business. Call 888-784-2929 or visit us at validar.com.
And now back to Matt and his guest.
Well, you really learn a lot, Paul, about people just by reading their LinkedIn bios. I'm doing an event later today, and part of it is I'm moderating a panel, and just reading through profiles, you learn about one of our panels. It was won an Emmy for some interactive content. Another panelist, has literally been to 95 countries. I mean, that's a lot of countries. It was just during the commercial break, just flipping through, Joe, your bio here as well, and all kinds of things. We could if we don't want to talk about content, let's talk about boxing. We could talk about criminal justice. Someone on your bio actually describes you as the Kevin Bacon of B2B content marketing, which is fascinating. So it's going to get back to Joe here in a second. If you want to hear more from any of our guests, including a replay of our event with Joe Chernov here today, you can check us out at salespipelinaeradio.com. Again, we're live every Thursday at 2:30 Eastern, 11:30 Pacific. Coming up in the next couple of weeks, we've got Deb Calvert. Super excited to have Deb. Appropriately enough, we'll have Deb live from San Francisco during Dreamforce Week. She is an expert at leadership development and team effectiveness. And so we're going to be talking to her about how to build and manage better sales and marketing teams. And the week after that, once we get back from Dreamforce, we've got Jamie Shanks, who is one of the founders and leaders of the social sales movement, and has just published a new book, Social Selling Mastery, which is really well done, and it's probably the best job I've seen of integrating social selling in with the broader sales strategy and sales process that your sales organization may be using. But back to Joe. Let's talk about sales a little bit. I think the opportunity to leverage the right content created by organizations beyond just at the top of the funnel, beyond just in marketing channels, is significant. What are some of your best practices for leveraging good content through the sales organizations and through the active sales process?
My number one rule hasn't changed since 2009. And that is your best content ideas come from your front lines, and that's your salespeople. Whether it's top-of-funnel content or bottom-of-funnel content, conversations with sales, particularly like BDRs and AEs. It doesn't have to be sales leadership. It probably shouldn't be sales leadership. That's where you're going to be sourcing your best ideas. And so we've taken that to another level here at Insight Squared, and here's what we're doing. Our blog, we treat our blog like a magazine. And so twice a month we publish a quote-unquote issue of our blog, and that means we have 3, 4, 5 articles all on a similar concept, and so there's a thematic consistency to each issue. And while search led to us going down that path, it turns out sales enablement is where we're headed all along. And so what we do to determine our issues now is we talk to sales, and each month our BDRs have a different theme that they pursue. And so we know what theme is coming up in the next month, and as we write the next month's issue of our blog, all of our articles are consistent with whatever that sales theme is going to be. So the BDRs always have very fresh and relevant and timely content. So if they're talking about Dreamforce, and that's the current issue, now they have 3, 4, 5 Dreamforce-related pieces to use in their outreach. And so why separate them? Our blog is both one-to-many and one-to-one.
Maybe the first time I've heard of a sales organization that basically has an editorial calendar. This isn't necessarily, that your content strategy and your messaging strategy doesn't need to be marketing to sales. And if sales has a sense for what their themes are, there's no reason why marketing can't tie into that as well. It seems like the central requirement for all of that and to make sure you're on the same page is really personas. Can you talk a little bit about how important personas are as a driving force behind good content marketing?
Yeah, I think personas are critical. We have 4 of them, and what they're effective at doing is, like the blank page is very intimidating, and what they tend to do is help reduce the size of your universe. And as a writer, as a content creator, having that smaller universe to work in is actually a luxury, because you don't have to think of everyone, you only have to think of one, or in this case 1 times 4, right, because we have 4 persona. Now, I also see, however, persona, people can get carried away with persona. I worked at a company where we were very militant about persona, right down to the persona had names, and they had specific universities that they went to, and they had a requisite identified number of children, and there would be arguments where one person would say, I'll just make up a name that's not one of the real persona names, but let's just say it's Susie Seller. And they would say, Susie Seller wouldn't say that. And somebody else would say, do you know where Susie Seller went to college? And at a certain point, I'd have to pop the balloon and say, wait, Susie Seller is a construct. All it's trying to do is help us focus on a particular role in an organization. But beyond that, I think we're getting a little bit carried away. So I found that at a certain point, it became less constructive. That said, the concept of having persona is it's liberating if you're trying to sit down and produce content.
Talking today with Joe Chernov, who runs marketing at Insight Squared, but has been a leader in B2B marketing for a long time, a startup advisor. If you've never seen Joe speak, you've got to find a conference where he's at. He's too modest to say this himself, but he's one of the most well-spoken, well-prepared speakers on the B2B marketing circuit that I've seen. And before we start talking more about your favorite Kiss songs, I'm just curious, as we go into next year, what are recommendations you'd have for companies that, the stats I've seen, 84% of companies are increased their spending on content. I think something like half of that 84% intend to spend a lot more, substantially more of their budget on content marketing. And yet 2/3 of those companies have a hard time comparing their content metrics to their business metrics. I realize that's a very hard thing to do, but what are the best ways you've seen for companies to justify and to measure the impact content is having on metrics that the business cares about overall?
Yeah, that's a very timely question, given that we're moving into 2017 planning right now and having those conversations right now. I believe that the very best way to go about shining a light on the value of your content marketing is to look at lead quality. Are leads sourced through content channels? That is, whether it's an ebook download, whether it's a blog subscriber, however you want to identify a transactional content success, look at that cohort of leads and compare them to other lead sources. And I can confidently say they're going to be of a higher value. And by a higher value, I mean they're more likely to sort of matriculate their way down through the funnel. And so you can look at it as, did they close? That's sort of the most black and white. But you could also say, did they move down to subsequent sales stages? They move deeper into the funnel than other sources. If they're moving deeper into the funnel, it means you're getting quality at bats, and the hits are going to come. So I think if I had to pick one, it would be lead quality.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah, and I think tracking and accountability is becoming more and more complicated. Let's not pretend that a particular blog post or white paper is actually generating the 6 or 7 figure sale. But there's clearly evidence that a content program, if given the time to build and mature, is creating velocity and efficiency in so many different levels of the pipeline. It's pretty incredible. Okay, so I promised I set you up earlier. I got to let you follow up on it. Favorite Kiss song and why?
I missed that. I'm sorry. It's a little broken up. Could you try again?
Oh, sorry. Favorite Kiss song?
Favorite Kiss song?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just took my son to, we just went to see Kiss a few weeks ago, and I think my favorite Kiss song is Deuce.
Oh.
And I actually read an article about, like, the making of Deuce, and apparently Gene Simmons just wrote it on a bus one day, and all these people speculate as to what it's about, and he said it's about absolutely nothing. I just wrote it on a bus ride, and I think it's their best song.
That's awesome. Yeah. So what's funny is I asked that question, and Paul perked up on the other side here. I think for Paul, it's definitely Detroit Rock City, which is also, I think, a solid choice. All right. Well, we'll let you off the hook, Joe. Thank you so much. Very, very much appreciate our guest today, Joe Chernov, who's the VP of Marketing at Insight Squared, the Godfather, the Kevin Bacon, one of the real innovators of B2B content marketing. So excited to have him here. If you want to hear more from Joe, if you'd like to hear replay this presentation and share this with other people on your team, you can definitely find that at salespipelineRadio.com. Definitely subscribe to our podcast as well at Google Play and the iTunes Store to get immediate access to every new episode. Of course, we're always here live every Thursday at 2:30 Eastern, 11:30 Pacific. And we will see you next week. Got a great set of guests coming up. We'll be heading down to Dreamforce here in a couple weeks, doing a show live from the show floor, and look forward to seeing you there. If you're going to be there, definitely look us up. We'll be out and about. In the meantime, this is Matt Hines. Thanks very much for joining us. This has been Sales Pipeline Radio.
Yes, sir. You've been listening to the Sales Pipeline Radio Show with Matt Hines from Hines Marketing, right here on the Funnel Radio channel.